Hello and welcome to this webinar in our How To series for Patronum. In this webinar, we're going to be talking about our Google Drive compliance features. Drive compliance, Google Drive governance. It's all about securing your Google Drive data. Well, before we get into a demonstration, let me just talk to you about why Drive compliance is so important. The information on the screen is from a data breach report from last year by IBM. And IBM discovered that last year alone, the average cost of a data breach was 4.8 million US dollars. Now that was the average price, and that was an increase of 10% on the previous year. Now different industries, different sectors have a higher or can have a higher average cost. Financial industry, as you'd expect, just over 6 million US dollars, and industry is the highest with an average cost reaching over 10 million US dollars. Now, you'll be familiar with some of the logos that we've got and the issues and the cases that they have that have been shared within the media over the past year about data breaches inside these organizations. Now, luckily, none of these organizations were using Google Workspace, or Google Workspace wasn't the cause of the data breach. However, Valio here at the bottom, they are a Google Workspace customer. However, the issue that they faced was from an ex-employee. Ex-employee downloaded and took some information from that organization, went to go and work for a new organization, NVIDIA, and then shared that information in a Microsoft Teams presentation, and it was clear that that information was obtained from Valio. And so Valio then sued NVIDIA for that use of the data and the breach of the information. Okay, so let's focus a little bit on the challenges that we have within Google Workspace. So as we mentioned with Valio, internal employees, they're your number one issue. Not just from a malicious perspective, but also from just the fact that they share and overshare the information. They may want to or need to share information with their own Gmail account. Now, that is often insecure, and you're not quite sure what's then happening with those particular files once they've been shared outside the organization. They may be sharing them with themselves for valid reasons, but they may also be copying and then stealing that information. The other issue that we see quite a lot of is just the disorganization of the Google Drive environment. Google Drive's been around for a long time, and it was only in 2017 that Google came out with Google Team Drives, as it was called initially, but now it's called Google Shared Drives, where organizations are starting to sort out and structure the data. However, there is still a legacy of information stored in users' My Drives, and trying to coerce users to use those central shared drives is quite challenging. And so there is work to be done in order to see what files are being shared from users' My Drives as well as shared drives. That then leads us on to just a lack of visibility from Google. Google just does not provide you with any tools to see who is sharing which information with whom. And so with Patronum, we're going to show you in the demo how you can get a clear view over who's using and who's sharing what with whom. Now, end user training. The issues above would be mitigated if we had improved end user training. How often do your end users set the expiry date on files that they are sharing with partners, with vendors, with companies externally? Or are they just sharing files and then forgetting about them? That's typically what happens, and those are the kind of things that we see quite a lot when customers use Patronum. That then leads us on to the hidden security risks with oversharing of files, the lack of divisibility, all those kind of things. That then means you cannot be compliant with standards such as ISO 27001, GDPR, HIPAA. If you don't know who has access to your data, then you're not compliant with any of those particular standards. Now, Google has a great offering available that you can purchase or you could upgrade to, which is the Google Data Loss Prevention solution. However, that is more interested in the content of the files and not the who those files are being shared with. And so we see Patronum and the Google Data Loss Prevention solution as a great team when it comes to covering both bases. Okay, with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into Patronum and we'll show you exactly how we can address some of those challenges in the Google Workspace environment. Okay, so this is the Patronum dashboard. So those of you who are familiar with Patronum, this is the dashboard section. Over the next few months, this dashboard will be enhanced and this will be your main landing page if you are a Google Workspace administrator. We've already done a webinar on the dashboard. My colleague Stuart has done a great video. It's available on YouTube. So once you finish watching this particular session, maybe jump over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/wearepatronum, and there you'll find all our how-to videos and other training materials related to Patronum. But from a Google Drive compliance section, what I'd like to highlight is the sharing statistics that we have here. If I expand this particular, we can see inside of Patronum the top 10 sharers inside our organization, the top 10 files that are being shared inside the organization, and the top 10 organizations we're sharing with. You know, who, what, and which organizations are we sharing that particular data with. Again, might be useful from a investigative perspective. You might be surprised at which organizations you're currently sharing data with. And again, you can look through this list to give you that initial broad brush view. Now, if you want to get into a little bit more detail, that's where the Drive section of our tool comes into play. And so inside this section, first of all, we've got the Shared Drive tab. The Shared Drive tab shows you all of the shared drives that your users have visibility over inside your Google Workspace environment. That's internal as well as external shared drives. So I can filter for shared drives that are outside of my organization. And I typically like to do this for customers or with customers once they've installed Patronum to give them a view over which companies they're collaborating with and which companies have pushed external shared drives to them, and whether or not those are potential risks of a data breach. It's not commonly known, but the easiest way to steal data from a Google Workspace environment is to receive an external shared drive. So if you had a bad actor inside your organization, they could quite easily just spin up a Google Workspace environment, create a shared drive, share it with themselves in the company, and then drag and drop all of the files into that shared drive. Those files have then gone. They've left your organization and now they belong to the other organization. They belong to the ex-employee organization. That information is gone and you'll not be able to retrieve it unless you have a backup solution. Okay, so the other area which is of huge interest is the file sharing section. Generally, when we go into this section, there are three key things that we tend to look at here. The first one is files that have been shared with the link. So these are files inside my organization that are just open to the internet. I can click on this particular link and that will show me every single file inside the organization that's been shared with just the link and who shared them. I can change the sharing, I can unshare all of those. I can also download a list of all of those files just in case I need to interrogate that. You may not get 12. If you have 12, you're lucky. You're going to find, depending on the size of your organization, potentially thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of files that are just shared generally with the link. We can also, through the padlock here, unshare, reduce the permissions, or change the sharing permissions. So maybe I don't want to share all these files with the link. I might just want to share it with anybody inside my organization, or I can just switch it off completely. Now, the other option inside the interface that we generally look at initially is anybody that has been shared that has a personal account. That's anybody with a Gmail account or any other personal account that you can share files with, Google Groups, etc. Again, we can see the users, we can interrogate the users, we can click on the user, we can see the files that have been shared, who shared it, and we can also unshare those particular files. And then lastly, the other section or the other filter is the external users. Who outside my organization has access to my data? And again, we can click on the user, we can interrogate, we can unshare, reduce their access, etc. So if I've got a user here that has, in fact, Stuart, he's a writer of one of the files. I can click on the padlock and I can say, well, I don't want Stuart to be an editor of any of the files inside our environment. I'm going to set his access to all my files as just a viewer. If he needs to edit a file, he's going to have to request for that access. I'm not going to do that quite yet because Stuart would be quite upset if I did that. But you can see the power of Patronum there. As we then just go through the tabs just to finish this off, we've got things such as the ability to search for files. I can search for file type, file ID. File ID is a really useful one. Generally, a lot of organizations help their end users find the ownership of files that they want to have access to. Maybe as part of your offboarding process, you're transferring files to another account, and you've been doing that maybe manually. You don't have tools like Patronum in place. When you click on a file from an email and that file, you don't have access to that file, you're not going to get access if that file isn't being managed or maintained by a real account. That's where you can get the file ID, put the file ID into Patronum, you'll find the file, you'll then be able to modify the permissions of that file, change the ownership of that file, etc. We also have inside of Patronum, or more accurately, Patronum Plus, policies around files. So let me just expand on this demo folder. And we can see that we've got a drive policy currently running inside our environment. So let's just expand and have a look at exactly what this particular policy does. So in the workflow section, we've defined the particular users that I'm interested in looking at a particular subset of users, and I'm only interested in looking at the users' My Drives. However, I could focus on all the users in our entire organization, and I could also look at shared drives as well as users' My Drives. But for this particular policy, what I'm looking at and what I'm interested in is a subset of our users, and I'm just interested in what they're sharing, because those tend to be the areas that are at more risk. I don't have great visibility over end users' My Drives. So once we've identified those particular files, we're going to decide what about the files am I interested in. And so in this example, we're going to be looking at files that have been shared with the link, but we could look at a multitude of options. So anybody who's sharing with a particular domain, any file that was shared in the last 10 to 15 days, any files that were older than a particular date, last modified, what labels have been applied, all those kind of things. So you can build up a very complex criteria when it comes to the files that you're interested in triggering this particular policy. But for now, all I'm interested in is quite a broad scope of anybody who shared a file with the link and also anybody who shared a file with a Gmail account. Those are my kind of major concerns inside my organization. I don't want people sharing with the link, and I don't want people sharing with Gmail. I realize that this is going to happen. You know, we're going to have to collaborate with people outside our organization, and they may not have a Google Workspace account. So they may be accessing the data via a Gmail account. And we need to have that collaboration to continue, but we don't want it to lapse and get forgotten about, especially if it's being shared with Gmail accounts. So what can we do within the policy? So what we can do with the policy is we can decide to unshare those files automatically. Now, we're not going to immediately just say, right, let's just unshare these files, because that would then hinder the collaboration. We're going to give our users 7 days in order to collaborate, do the work, and then we're going to unshare those particular files. However, we're also going to help educate our users. And so we're going to email the users every time the policy runs and send them an email to tell them which files inside their Google Workspace environment they have shared that is now in breach of this particular policy. Now, we're going to send the email every day. Now, that might be a little bit overkill. This is just a demo system after all, but we could set it to a weekly, so once a week, you send an email which then collates all the information together, or you could do it on a monthly basis. Now, we've also added to the policy, and we're giving the end user the ability to snooze and add the files to a safe list. Now, the snooze is a short-term method in which we can ask Patronum not to tell me about this particular file for a period of time. So we're going to say a number of months. So don't tell me about this particular file for X number of months. The time frames are short because we just want to snooze the particular request. We could also have a safe list where we believe as an end user we're collaborating with this organization and we're going to be collaborating with them for an extended period of time. So please don't remind me about this particular file for a longer period of time. And so in this example, we've said 6 months. Now, you may remove those, you can increase those. Again, really customizable to define on a policy by policy basis. You can then tailor that to the different types of users, the different types of shared drives, all those kind of things. So that policy will then run. It's already run. I can, if I wish, add particular domains. If I was looking for anybody shared externally, I could say except google.com, for example. We could add those particular domains to the allowed list. So once the policy runs, it will find all the files that meet that particular criteria, and it will then send the end user an email to let them know that certain files are in breach of the criteria. And so that would then look like this. So they would have an email. So if I'll just log into my end user's Gmail environment and find the emails that this particular policy has triggered. And here's one where we can see that a particular file or 2 files here have been shared with the link, and they've been shared with other people. So we can see who owns it. It's my email, and so those have been shared externally. I can then, as the end user, jump into Patronum, and I can see from a file compliance perspective the files that I have shared with the users that breach the policy that has been specified. I can see here that I've got 1, 2, 3 files, and I can make some decisions about them. I can open up the files themselves and just check, what's inside them, etc. I can change the configuration. So I can say, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change and remove access. And if any other files pop up with the same issues, this is what I would like to happen in the future. So if I forget to unshare files, when you remind me, just automatically perform the actions on my behalf. I could also snooze the file, again, just adding it to that snooze list, or I could add it to the safe list. This then gives the responsibility and the ownership of managing the files to the end user. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can just remove or not include those particular options within the policy. That's absolutely fine. We have some organizations that their initial policy is to find all files shared with a link and just unshare them. As a broad, we need to get on top of our oversharing. So we're going to make sure that all files that have been shared externally, we're going to stop and unshare those. And then we can start to educate users moving forward. Okay, so that ends the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. Let me jump back into the presentation here, and we'll just finish off. Okay, so as I was saying, many of the features specifically around the Patronum Plus options, they're $16 per user per year. Patronum itself is $8 per user per year. Patronum Plus, with all the file compliance, the file-based policies, is $16 per user per year. It's available currently to all Patronum customers. We've decided that we want to seed the market, make sure that everybody understands what Patronum Plus is. So we've given Patronum Plus as an extended trial to all of our Patronum customers. However, very soon, we will be switching that off. And if people want to then upgrade to Patronum Plus, there will be signposts in the refreshed version of Patronum in the coming days. If you're new to Patronum, you can install Patronum from the Google Marketplace, and you get 30 days for free to try all of the features from the user onboarding, user offboarding, email signature management, contact sharing, Drive compliance, file unsharing, all of the features. Everything is available within the trial. If you're interested, please go to the website besbinlabs.com and select the schedule a call. Myself or one of my colleagues will be available to walk you through the solution. And with that, I will thank you for your time and look forward to speaking with you all on the next how-to webinar with Patronum.